The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Abbas, has called for urgent and proactive measures to address the escalating cybersecurity threats in Africa. The Speaker made the call at the fourth live hacking cybersecurity conference held in Abuja on Monday. Represented by the Chairman, House Committee on Digital Information, Communication Technology and Cybersecurity, Adedeji Olajide, the conference themed 141 servers down, a call for proactive defense strategy, provided a platform for cybersecurity experts, policymakers and stakeholders to deliberate on safeguarding Africa's digital infrastructure. Delivering the keynote address on behalf of the Speaker, Olajide stressed the importance of the theme, noting its timelines and relevance in the face of growing cyber attacks. Now to discuss this, we're joined by tech analyst Temitayo Okunboyejo. Temitayo, it's wonderful to have you join me. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get started and talk about the common types of cyber threats that national governments and even critical infrastructure systems might face.
Hey, good evening, and thank you for having me. So I believe in this instance, whilst I want to commend the government, they might possibly have put the cart before the horse in that we don't have a national cybersecurity strategy just yet. And that would be the starting point for any kind of follow-up regulations that several sectors of the economy would be required to comply with. So, and you know, those sectors will be kind of divided up depending on their criticality to both the, you know, the people as a whole and to the country nationally. And in addition to that, there are several areas where it's important for the Ministry of Defense to lead. So with regards to, you know, cyber threats against sovereign nations, which is not uncommon now, and without naming countries, there are several attacks around the world that have happened, which thus now mandates the requirement for governments to pay very important attention to this aspect of global threats that countries now have to face. So with respect to this sort of holistic thinking, that is perhaps something that we need the federal government or maybe the executive to lead on. So number one, we need to see the Ministry of Defense leading on, you know, ensuring that emerging threats that the Nigerian nation faces as regards the cyberspace or digital threats are both identified, and it's important to have policies that would address both the short, medium, and long-term threats as they evolve.
Right.
So that's on that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, as we're talking about the government, I would like to bring PPPs, and that's a public-private partnership. Do you see them playing any role when it comes to enhancing cybersecurity efforts at a national level as well?
So with regards to, I mean, so sometimes there are conversations that we have where the role of the private sector is that of compliance. You know, they need to show us cooperation by complying with whatever sort of standards or regulations that the government comes up with. So it's, you know, I am not sure what the role of the private sector is, apart from helping to support as regards compliance and providing governments with information as to how to bring down any barriers associated with compliance. But even now, as it is, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not even aware of any regulations aside from the Data Protection Act, and even at that, it's not clear to me how the government enforces enforcement of all the requirements, or shall I say the compliance measures within the Data Protection Act specifically. Right. So the role of the private sector at the moment, you know, I'm not sure is clearly defined or is one that's important for now.
I mean, you've also talked about framework and even saying that, you know, the government have done a fantastic job putting cart before the horse. Let's talk about technical challenges, shall we? When it comes to securing government digital, you know, infrastructure. Let's put into picture what this is. what are the technical challenges that will be involved in securing, government digital infrastructure, and most importantly, protecting sensitive data from cyber threats? And someone might be watching this and saying, like, do we really need that? Like, are the files, I mean, we have seen cases where money is stolen and, people are still trying to get on board to NIN and the rest. Are there any technical challenges that might even happen? Do we even have such sensitive data to begin with?
So of course there are sensitive data. In fact, to begin with, one of the places to start is the amount of leak we see. All those leaked government letters and approvals and whatnot that get leaked, and we see people start sharing around all over WhatsApp. That's one aspect of cybersecurity that the government is not paying attention to, and it's probably the starting point where government data, important government, in fact, the right kind of classification for our documentation is not seen. And therefore, because of that, you tend to see, government documents all over the place. So there is that. Now, secondly, when we talk about do we have, of course we do. So there are, I mean, if we want to talk about government, if I talk about, say, governments in general, most governments across the world would have general documentation, they'll have official documentation, they'll have sensitive documentation, and there are even levels higher than sensitive. There will be documentation or there will be data that maybe perhaps only the Minister of Defense is meant to see it, or maybe just the president and maybe a few people around him are required to see. These are very, very sensitive data that are critical to the national security of the country, and these need to be protected. And that's just on paper side. And when we now talk about infrastructure, so there are several areas, even though it may be difficult to see how this would play out. You find advanced nations across the world looking to ensure that they secure what they call essential services to their population, so health services, electricity, even banking in some instances, water supply, food treatment. These are all areas that enemies of nations have been known to attack. A very popular one is the Ukraine power attack a few years ago, even up until like 2 or 3 years ago. So, you find, national actor, enemies of states, say, attacking a country's electricity infrastructure. In the current environment and in this age, it's a significant attack to put at the nation, because you are essentially trying to cripple not just the economy, you are also trying to cripple essential services that people's lives may depend on.
Well, I mean, Temitayo, I'm glad we're having this conversation and we're sounding the alarm, the need, the very immediate and, of course, very needful alarm when it comes to cybersecurity and cyber threat, especially when it comes to the governance and the government level. But Temitayo, this is where we have to, close the curtain for this discussion. But many thanks for taking out the time this day just to discuss with us. Temitayo Ogumboyejo, she is a tech analyst and just speaking to us about the calls for more deliberation when it comes to safeguarding Africa's digital infrastructure, most importantly, government's digital infrastructure.